NAFI would like to thank Avemco and ICOM for sponsoring this episode of the More Right Rudder podcast. ICOM America is a proud supporter of the National Association of Flight Instructors and values its commitment to aviation education in the community. From students to professional pilots and ground crew, ICOM has the right handheld, mobile, or panel mount VHF radio for you. Pilots choose ICOM for features such as Bluetooth, bright displays, and easy-to-use interfaces. Whether it's your first flight or first solo, we appreciate what you do. For stress-free in-flight operations, choose ICOM. Add before flight.
Welcome to NAFI's More Right Rudder podcast. I'm Beth Stanton, NAFI's Director of Publications and Editor. This is The Writers Behind the Stories, a series where we meet some of the authors who write for Mentor magazine. Today's guest is Joe Clark. Joe is a journalism graduate from the University of Florida and over the years has been a frequent contributor to Mentor magazines along with other aviation magazines. He is the owner of Blue Water Press, which is a small publishing company dedicated to producing quality books and giving first-time authors a chance to succeed as professional writers. Joe is a former naval aviator, a CFI, and he has a master's degree in aviation and aerospace education. His flight instruction experience includes dual given in aircraft as diverse from Aztecs to Cubs and as well as Part 135 flying. Joe is currently retired faculty at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida, and he now focuses on tailwheel training in his Aeronca Champ and rebuilding a Cessna 170. Joe is also the 2016 recipient of NAFI's Greg J. Laszlo Excellence in Writing Award. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here because Joe is one of those authors who I inherited from NAFI's former editor, David Hipschman. So it's been going on 3 years now that I've been NAFI's editor. And one of the first things David did was he said, you have to talk to Joe Clark. And Joe and I had a long conversation. And over the years, Joe's written, I stalked you on the internet and I looked on your Embry-Riddle page and I saw that between 2011 and 2014, you wrote, I think, 13 articles for Mentor magazine.
Wow, that
So
sounds about right.
you were quite prolific there. And then you had other situations going on in your life and you focused on other things. And you wrote, the first article you wrote for me was the November-December issue of 2023, and it's called Back in the Air, Returning to Teaching After a Decade, which kind of gives you a little sense of where you went for a while. And that story was just such a heartfelt, well-received article, beautifully written. And so I want to ask you, Joe, you go back a while, and obviously you won the Laszlo Award back in 2016. So you have a long tradition of writing. Also, you've written for AOPA, EAA, the Airplanista online. Is that for Embry-Riddle's publication? So you've done a lot of aviation writing over the years, and you own a publishing company. So you're very steeped in aviation writing. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, you went to journalism school. So give us a little journey on how you got interested in why did you do all this aviation writing and to the point where you started your own publishing company?
Well, it actually started out a long time ago. When I learned how to read, I knew I would be a writer. And even before then, I always knew I'd be a pilot. And I'm lucky enough to be able to say that I have supported myself doing both of the things that I love to do. And it's been a great journey. It really has. Um, I ended up with a crush on a girl in high school. And unfortunately, she was shot by her boyfriend. And that's how we disconnected because her family did not pass out any more information about her whereabouts. She just disappeared off the face of the earth until I got out of the Navy. And 28 years later, I had a problem with my phone. And when I called up Bell South, um, she answered the phone. We were both shocked, and we got married 2 years to the weekend of that phone call. And my disappearance from flying was to take care of her in her last 5 years of life. She became very ill because she fell and had a head injury that led to more falls. So it was a really rough time for both of us. And of course, and the reason I say I'm rebuilding this 170 is because during the time that I was taking care of her, she was my first priority. The students at school were my second priority. And what had to drop was the 170. Um, and by the time I got back to it after she passed, it had some pretty serious corrosion issues. So I've got to figure that one out. I don't know if I'm going to part it out, sell it outright, or rebuild it. Time will tell. Plus, uh, how busy I am in that thing, and that's a lot of fun. The the time that I spent, and that article that you just referenced, I was literally out of the cockpit for 10 years, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't have any idea that it was that long. That's how fast time passed. So I give credit to my buddy Mike Holloman. He said, "Let's go fly." And after we flew, and I pulled out my logbooks, I was shocked to find out it was 10 years. And then I've had great support from a lot of the members of NAFI, David Hipschman for one, and others. It's been a great return to flying. I've put about 300 hours on the Champ now, teaching people how to fly. And it was really funny. When I got back into it, I thought that I'd be teaching a lot about tail wheel stuff. The airplane teaches pilots all by itself. I just climbed into the back seat and I watched as pilots suddenly discovered there was a rudder on the back of the airplane. and the airplane let them know all about adverse yaw again. It was really amazing.
Wow, I love that line. I didn't teach them about tailwheel, the airplane did. How amazing. So I think that statement in and of itself, Joe, tells a little bit about you and your philosophy as a flight instructor.
Oh, that's a great question. That is a great question. Um, I this was quite funny. I was flying here at the Massey Air Ranch, and when Mike and I flew his airplane, one time we went out, we came back, we're putting fuel in the airplane, and I see a guy, and he actually owned the flight school here, one of the flight schools. And he looked familiar to me. I looked familiar to him. And then we finally realized he was in my classes 25 years previously. And I worked with Jose to use his airplanes to teach others how to fly when I needed an airplane with lights, instruments, and radios. And the funniest thing happened, he was ambivalent about it. He said, "Yeah, just go ahead and jump in the airplane." And I said, "Yeah, but what about your insurance, Jose?" And he goes, "Okay, maybe we should take it around the patch a couple of times." Well, the day that I was going to ride with him, he had to do something else. So he passed me off to one of his instructors who had about 700 hours total time. And yeah, it was a pretty good gusty day that day with a good crosswind. And so, I just landed it a couple of times. And as we were flying, This poor fellow was nervous as a cat. He was doing this with the flight controls the whole time. And I told him after the fact, when we got done, I said, "Are you ready for the debrief?" And he got out all the paper to sign, and we signed all that. And then I said, "Okay, now let's have the real debrief." And then I gave him tips on how to be a flight instructor, most notably being, hey, you can't do this while you're flying with a student because you just destroy their confidence. And I've often said that I can fly an airplane almost as well by talking to the student as I can hands-on with the flight controls. And one of the things that I've discovered over the 6,000 hours of dual given I've had in my logbook is that the students do not learn how to fly if you are writing the flight controls. So you've got to be able to talk to them and let them fully experience what's going on with flight controls.
Well, you're just, as you're talking, I'm like, that would be a good article for you to write, Joe. How to teach without touching, teaching without touching, talking,
I'll make a note of it.
not touching, but talking. How did, I don't know. See, you guys, this is how the sausage is made. We're spitballing here. But no, that's this led in the story you just told us, we led into it by saying like it tells a lot about you as a flight instructor, the fact that you let an aircraft teach, not you, and then you just told the student about like hands off is how you teach. But here's the thing. You had, I would assume, Joe, had to learn through experience, how to do that. So, this theme of, when the ink on your ticket was dry and they said, here's your CFI ticket, I bet you didn't have that mentality necessarily. So now here
Oh
you
no.
are, 6,000 hours in. So there is an evolution in your development as an instructor. And so I think conversations such as this, um, articles that people write, and not even if they're like how-to articles, but maybe kind of philosophy articles, like the philosophy of your instruction. How do we get this type of information to the next generation of pilots, Joe?
That's a great question. And one of the things with the champ there, I started another company, Abed Consulting LLC, which can be found at tailwheelcfi.com. And one of the things that I'm seriously thinking about doing with that company is actually putting together seminars for new flight instructors to pass on
Mm.
these little tidbits that can help them learn and develop themselves.
Wow, I love that. And by the way, guys, I didn't know about this. So see how this information comes out in the course. And so, NAFI's mission, which you've been affiliated with for so long, is, getting information out there to people, making flight instructors better teachers, making safer pilots. And there's so many different ways we can come at that. And there's so, we're all individual. We have our own personality, we have our own experience, we have our own approach.
Mm-hmm.
Conveying that information is so important. And one of the ways that you've conveyed this information, Joe, for years, decades, has been through writing. So I'd like to kind of go back to that. I knew I was going to write her as soon as I could read. You wanted to be a writer and you wanted to be a pilot. So tell me about that alchemy, that magic intersection between Joe the writer and Joe the pilot that brought you to this illustrious body of work that you have to your name now that you have also shared with NAFI.
Well, I was a lost soul like many freshmen and sophomore in college. Um, and my original plan wasn't working out as well as it was supposed to. And so I had this idea that I was going to major in music education and with a backup of journalism. Um, and sure enough, what happened the summer after I graduated high school, I started flying. And, music is still a passion of mine, but flying is a lot more exciting, a lot more rewarding, and a lot more fun. And so I decided I was going to, well, when I started thinking about being serious about flying, I thought, well, I'll go check out the aeronautical engineering degree. And they promptly told me I did not have the background, the mathematical background to get through the program anytime soon. So I ended up going to my second choice of a major, which was journalism. Uh, I was a voracious reader throughout high school and before. As a matter of fact, when I think about reading, the story that comes to me is 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. I read the book in fifth grade, and I was lying in my upper bunk at home, reading this book, totally absorbed in it. And I just read the passage where Ted Lawson got his leg opened up by the crash off the China beach. And my mom yelled at me to take out the garbage. And my immediate response, without thinking, was, I can't, Mom. My leg hurts too much. That's how much I was into the book. So I've been a reader. I've been a big time reader. And I knew that if I didn't go into music, if I couldn't fly, whatever, I could always make a living with words. And I have. Um, it's been a great ride all along. It really has. When Artis, that's my wife, when we married, we discovered we were both writers, and that's what led to the publication business. Um, Hers was the first book we put out, and then we put out much more. I think I'm at about 100 titles in the catalog now. Some of which are aviation, but there's a very eclectic collection of books and titles. But it's been fun. All of it has been fun. It's been busy, but it's been fun.
So can you think back to the first aviation article that you wrote?
Yes, I can.
So tell us about why you wrote it. So here you are, you're waxing poetic about like the reason why you wanted to write in flying. So like let's move this narrative. Tell us why you wrote this article, Joe.
When I was finishing up at the University of Florida, this is funny. The professor said nobody's going to fail this course. If you come to class, you're going to get a D. If you write a query letter, you'll get a C. If you mail the query letter off and it gets accepted, you'll get a B. And if you get money, you will get an A. So I got an A. My first aviation writing was to Plane and Pilot. Um, it was about how to buy and fly antique airplanes. I go back and I look at that article on occasion, and I compare the numbers with today, and I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked because in the article I wrote that you could buy an early 1960s vintage Tri-Pacer for $4,000. That same airplane today is 10 times that amount or more. And I talked about the operational costs, gas being real cheap back then. It's with 50 years of experience in aviation, I am amazed at where we have come from to where we are now. I when I open up a class and I introduce myself, I talk to the kids about my experience and when I learned how to fly. And honestly, if it hadn't been for Charlie Miller, who in 1971, when I graduated from high school, was 71 years old, I would have never become a pilot because I got in the airplane with him. He charged $7 an hour to rent Cubs, and he charged $2 an hour for himself. So for the princely sum of $9 an hour dual, I started the path. And at first, I wasn't going to be serious about it because I was saving money for college. But after that very first lesson, I had to go back. And and I think about that today in context of the kids today. And I can't believe they're paying $300 an hour for a Cessna 172. That just it shocks me, to tell you the honest truth. Um, and I wish it wasn't so. When I finally got to my private check ride in '73, my mother figured I was pretty serious about it, so she offered to pay my designated pilot examiner's fee, which was a princely $40. And now, you know what it is now.
Well, as you're telling the story, and I'm thinking like in the beginning, you guys, when I said retired from professor from Embry-Riddle, they keep dragging him back. So maybe you're a wannabe retiree. We were just down at Embry-Riddle campus for an NAFI summit a
I
couple months
know, I
ago.
know, and I missed it. I wasn't here.
And here we are in this, state-of-the-art, gorgeous campus, these young people, on this collegiate track to become aerospace and pilot professionals.
Mhm.
And you can look at the website and see what it costs to go to Embry-Riddle. And so yeah, I would
I
imagine
know.
to be immersed in that environment right now, Joe, as a professor and an instructor, in comparing it to your experience all those years ago. um, I mean, how, so I guess the question is, here we are at NAFI. We are flight instructors. We make new pilots. So as an instructor that has this very vast years in the industry, can you tell us like what you see that is maybe more challenging for students these days, or that maybe is easier for students these days? Like, give us your 10,000-foot bird's eye of the evolution of this industry. No pressure.
Oh man, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I take a look at the rental rates and instructional rates, and I've had students come to me and ask if, this was before I was teaching in the Champ. They asked if I was taking on individual students, and at that time I was still taking care of my wife, so I was not active at all. But we had some pretty good discussions. They asked if I did flight instruct on the outside, how much would I charge? And I said, well, probably in the neighborhood of 75 to $100. And several students said, oh, nobody will ever pay that rate. And I said, listen, I don't need the money. I'm not teaching for the money. I teach for the passion. And here's what I'm going to tell you. An old guy like me who has this range of experience from winter flying to mountain flying to tactical jet operations, cross countries, literally from the Pacific to the Atlantic. We are not in the majority. What I see happening right now, and this is very unfortunate, we are having flight instructors that are brand new teaching. And every flight instructor candidate that I worked with, I would tell them it's okay to teach to get your hours for the airlines. But while you are teaching, you have to be authentic with your student. You have to be with them all the way. You have to do the job very carefully and teach that candidate exactly as though you were teaching your brother, your sister, or other family member. And too many times I've unfortunately read accident reports that were quite scary. The one that comes to mind is the instructor who was berating his student on social media in that on that cross country, and they ran into the heavy thunderstorms and
No,
loss.
that was on the cover of Mentor, the issue after yours. That was in the January, February 2024. I have a mind like
Yeah,
a steel trap.
you do.
Yeah, no, so that's yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's an egregious like exhibit A of like everything that can go wrong. Now, granted, most are not that bad, but you're right. And other NAFI like board members, like I know Aaron Dabney and Brian Schiff have spoken extensively about this. You can build your hours, but when you're teaching, you're teaching. Be dedicated
Right.
to that teaching.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's one of the things I look at the industry right now, and I feel like there's too many pilots who are in that boat, who are teaching just to get hours to get to the airlines. And like I say, I don't have anything against that. I just want them to focus in on the student while they're doing it. And I've been very surprised and pleasantly surprised by many of my former students who became CFIs, and like me, they went into it with an open mind, not knowing what to expect, and then fell in love with the process.
Mm.
And that's the key issue right there. You got to fall in love with the process. And I've talked with instructors before who had issues, we'll say issues, and I would advise them just to quit. You need to stop teaching because you're not doing service to the student, and that's kind of scary.
Well, listen, I actually love that you just said that. Because there's a way to encourage people to help people develop as people and individuals and humans and instructors as professionals. And then there's sometimes you just see the writing on the wall and be like, yeah, you need to maybe go do something else. And um, that takes kind of some cojones to do that, Joe. You have to be that could be an unpleasant conversation to have, but a very necessary one. It's almost like,
It
honey, we
is.
have to talk, you
It
know?
is.
Like sometimes you
And
have to have
and
those conversations.
and when I do that, I try to be as respectful and as easy as I can when I have to do that. Because it's not only the flight instructor's level that I've done this at. That poor student who keeps trying and trying and trying and doesn't get it, that's another hard conversation to have.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like you have to figure out where is that line. Do you just need more training? Do you just need more help? Or is it really like, no, this isn't for you? And I think that's such an individual decision to make, and it takes a
It
lot of
is.
discernment on your part to notice that. Um, so, we're talking about how to be a great flight instructor, how to be a great teacher, how to listen to your students, how to notice what's going on. Um, you obviously have dedicated your life to flying and to writing. And in particular, I would love to learn about your prolific contributions to NAFI Mentor magazine over the years. How did you get started writing for Mentor? It sounds like it maybe started happening around the 2010-ish timeframe.
I think it was 2007 or 8.
Okay.
David was fresh to NAFI, and I met him up the first time at Sun and Fun, and we got to talking, and the next thing we know, we're you know we find out that we had a lot of things in common, and so it was just a natural fit, to tell you the honest truth. It really was. Um, and he would say, "Do you have anything about this, or do you have anything about that?" And I'd go back and look through my blogs, and sure enough, I'd have something, and I'd expand it a little bit and send it to him. And that's how it first started. Some of the short parts or the short pieces, and then it boomed from there.
So you're telling me this, I'm like, David is the amazingest arm twister, isn't he? I think I think he could sell snow to an Eskimo. He'd be like, So tell us a little bit about these blogs that you just spoke of.
Okay, on the Blue Water Press, actually, it's not the Blue Water Press blog. in 2011, uh, that movie, Julia and Juliet,
Mhm.
my wife and I were sitting there with the cat in between us, watching this movie. Uh, and I had probably since the internet started to get big, I had always known I needed to write a blog, and so I wrote a blog, and it's joeclarksblog.com, which it's not a great name, but it works. And in it, I write about publishing, I write about writing, I write about aviation, and so I have a bunch of stuff in there, and I committed that first year to writing every day. And I did. I wrote a piece for that blog every day of that
Hey,
first year,
a lot.
except for one day when my best friend's dad passed. Missed that day. But there was a lot of stuff in there about aviation. And so, occasionally David would say, "Hey, can I steal from your blog?" And I'm like, "Yeah, just go take whatever you want." And so that was that's how the shorter pieces got into the magazine on occasion. But yeah, it was interesting putting it together. And then after that first year, I slacked off some. And in these past couple of years, with everything that I've been doing, I haven't been writing as much as I should, because like I'm cleaning this house. Uh, if I were to take down that screen, you'd see a big mess behind me. The printer, papers. I can't wait to get it all finished. But I keep flying and I keep teaching and I keep running around. And I haven't been to the beach yet, and I haven't gone fishing in 10 years, something
Okay.
like
Well, it sounds like you have lots of different balls in the air and you got to just like pick and choose which ones. So, okay, so far, what do you say it's called? Joe Clark's blog?
joeclarksblog.com. It's all
Okay. So
one word.
and so this is a nice little segue because I think some of our listeners here, they've gotten the call from Beth saying, "Hey, how would you like to write?" Or I read something that you posted on social media. How would you like now we have the social media, someone like Aaron Dabney's written stuff on social media, and I'm like, dude, turn this into an
Exactly.
article. So you can see how us editors work. We
Oh,
see
yeah.
somebody
Oh,
out
yeah.
there doing something and we kind of poke you and prod you a little bit and like,
Mhm.
let's do a little bit more. So, what would your advice be, Joe, for somebody who's listening right now to this conversation and they have some stories and they have some information and they're wondering, I wonder if I should put this down in a Word doc and send it to Beth. What would you tell them?
Do it. No two
Why
ifs,
should they
ands,
do
or
it?
buts. One of the blogs that I wrote was about the natural writer. I've had students in the past who, uh, when they would turn in work to me, I would actually look at them and say, "Have you ever thought about writing for money?" And they were, and I like to call them the unpretentious writers. They would go, "No, I don't do that." And I say, "Why not?" And I would have these articles pinned to the board outside my office, and I would drag them out there and I would say, "Yeah, that was about an hour's worth of research, an hour's worth of writing and editing, and maybe 2.5 hours total, and that was $300." And they go, "Wow, that's good
Well,
money."
don't
And
say that for NAFI because we're a
I,
volunteer
I know, I know,
contribution.
but you're right. No, I'm talking about other mags.
Yeah,
Um, but
throw me under the
yeah.
bus here, Joe.
Um, but they would suddenly have the idea that it would probably be better as part-time writing versus part-time burger flipping. And so Some of the kids got on board with it. Some still, went by, but and every one of these college students, I tell them, listen, you need to do this because you're not going to just fly airplanes for the rest of your life. You're going to develop a reputation, and your reputation will be spread by your writing. So
Well,
go do it.
it's interesting. So there's so many reasons to write. One is money, if you can get paid for
Mhm.
that. Um, but there's so many non-tangible things. And as you're telling this story, I wrote for different aviation publications. I wrote a innovation column for EAA for about 7 years. And I'm
Uh-huh.
laughing when you're talking. Let me tell you, those 1,200 words usually took me about 40 hours of research and interviewing and writing. And if you divide out what they paid me, I probably would have made more flippin' burgers, actually, Joe. Um,
Oh,
but
and that there is truth to
but,
that.
but here's
There
the
is truth
thing.
to that.
But here's the thing. I'm sitting here talking to you right now because of the opportunities and the connections and
Yeah.
just the so writing for its own sake is satisfying. Writing to share with your community, to share information is satisfying, and you never know where it's going to take you. Um,
You don't.
Patrick Howell, who writes our the On Your Wing meet a member column in the magazine. Um, this is Patrick's actually this is his inaugural one. I basically called him up and asked him if he'd do it. He didn't come to me. I asked
Mhm.
him and he graciously agreed. And now he's been doing it a couple of years now. And he gets to say that he's a columnist for an internationally known flight instructor association. So even like a bullet point on your resume is a good thing.
Exactly.
And then it leads you other
Exactly.
places.
And I often point out to the safety experts that are on television, like Sullivan and oh gosh, who's that other one from American Airlines? I can't remember his name now, but they're always in demand anytime there's an incident in the industry. And they have written books, they have written articles, and I tell my students, develop yourself into a good writer.
Yeah. And like you said, it gives you some cred in the industry. Your teacher, your writer, you've provided, one of the NAFI Master Flight Instructor program, one of the criteria for that is, you've contributed through written art, like a doctor, submitting to medical
Right.
journals. You write information for your industry. So, as we
Hmm.
wrap up here, Joe, I want to talk about this mentoring process. So, Samantha Boyer, who is actually Samantha won the NAFI Egg Spuler Award for 2024, I believe.
Hmm.
For her help with NAFI Summit is sort of spearheading that charge. Samantha has contributed to Mentor Magazine, and when Sam was writing her first article, I believe, she reached out to you as a colleague at Embry-Riddle for advice, and you proofread it and you gave her suggestions. So tell us a little bit about, obviously you're a mentor for flight students, but you've also been a mentor for other writers. So when Sam came to you and said, Joe, what do you think? Could I make this better? And I know you gave her some different tips, and I don't know if you remember specifics, but tell me about the value of helping people in this regard, and like with your publishing house. You're committed to helping writers as well as pilots.
Exactly. Exactly. Sam came to me, and you're right. I don't remember the specifics because it was so long ago, but it was a good solid start. And all I did was suggest that she rearrange some of the topics um, and bullet points so that it flowed better. And that's about all I remember about it. But yeah, and I do that with everybody who asks me about writing. Um, and it's been a joy to tell you honest truth. It really has. Um, Not as much as flying. I like the flying a lot better. It's a lot more exciting. But I get a rush out of helping people straight off.
Right.
It doesn't matter what they're doing. If I can help somebody, I like helping them because it it gives me a sense of satisfaction. It
Well,
really
and
does.
I was just telling somebody yesterday, there's two things in life. The more you give of them, the more you get. And those
There
two
you
things
go.
are love and teaching. You know, the more you
It,
love, the more love you get back. And the more you teach, the more, you expand your knowledge base, you expand your
mhm.
education, the more you educate. And I think that is such a huge message at NAFI and at Mentor Magazine is people give of themselves, they give of their knowledge and they share it. And it's that rising tide lifts all ships kind of thing where we
Yep.
all win. You know, you win from sharing your knowledge, people win from receiving it.
Yep. And I was so pleased, when her article came out, I was absolutely pleased with that.
Yeah, it's like
Absolutely.
watching your student pass their check ride, right? It's like, yeah, you did it. Like you had a part in that success.
Yep,
And I think
exactly.
that's one thing that's always struck me about NAFI members is just how giving everybody is. I mean, and not just the members, the board and the staff and the officers. Like, by the way,
Hmm.
most of those guys are volunteers too. You know,
I
NAFI
know.
officers
Exactly.
and board. These guys give
Exactly.
out of so much time, so much effort, and it's all like a labor of love. So we're all in this together. We're all helping each other out. And Joe, it's just been such a pleasure having you here on the show. Actually, getting to see you in person for the first time.
Indeed.
I've been talking to Joe for years, but this is actually the first time we've met and on Zoom. And just your long, long history with NAFI and writing for NAFI. Thank you so much. And we would just look forward to anything. I'm not twisting your arm like David. Well, maybe I am, but we would look forward to seeing more from you in the future. Like you have such a wealth of knowledge.
Well, interestingly enough, I'll send you something on takeoffs
Okay. Excellent.
because just Saturday I was getting ready to go fly with a private student, not in the Champ, but in a Cherokee at New Smyrna, and one of the flight schools lost an airplane. 200 feet, the engine quit, and they did everything right. They put the nose down, they kept the speed up, and they landed at the end of the runway, but they ran off the end of the runway and through a fence and turned upside down. It looked spectacular, but no injuries at all. And it's been a weird week because I started talking to my students last Monday about that. Then we had an FAA safety meeting in which one of my colleagues spoke about takeoff emergencies. And then this happened on Saturday. So yeah, and I thought I need to put this down in words and get it out somewhere.
And here's what's interesting. In the history of aviation, how many times has that particular scenario similar happened? Probably, I don't know, hundreds, thousands, I don't know. Here's the thing, there's lessons we can learn from every
Definitely.
one of them. And it's like there's always something unique about each situation that we can learn from. You know, it's
You
it's
know,
yeah.
it's really amazing because and this is one of the things I share with my students. When I was where they were or where they are now, um, engine failure scared me to death, but it doesn't now. If I'm at altitude, I know I'm going to have some place to land the airplane. If it quits on takeoff, that's a different story. Um,
Well, and
it
your
is.
unique perspective on it and this unique, one of my writing mentors, a lot of times people can say like, oh, it's there's been 9,000 articles written on engine failure on takeoff. Why do I have to write another one? And she would say,
Exactly.
it's all been done before, but not by you.
Yeah.
I always
Exactly.
love that because we all have our unique voice, our unique perspective, and the situation is unique. So we look forward to that, Joe. And also, let's see, teaching without touching. Is that kind of the one we were talking about?
Let me make a note.
Write that art. I think teaching without touching is a good working title. But see how this works, you guys. So,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
well,
Most
Joe,
of the time, that's one of the things that most students have a problem with. What am I going to write about?
Right.
And you're right, this is a great venue for creating titles.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for all the work you've done over the years and the work that you're going to do in the future with us. And just in the show notes, we will have the different, your Blue Water Press, Joe Clark's blog, and what was the other one, Joe, that you said about the tailwheel tip?
Tailwheelcfi.com.
Tailwheelcfi.com. So we'll get all that information out there. People can get in touch with you. And again, it's just been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for coming on.
You bet. I enjoyed it. Take
So
care.
thank you everybody for joining us for the Writers Behind the Stories. I'd like to invite you to consider sharing your stories. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of NAFI's More Right Rudder podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe. You can get this podcast in video version on YouTube, or you can get the audio version anywhere you get your podcasts. New and returning NAFI members can save $5 on their annual membership by using the code PODSAVE5, PODSAVE5, the numeral, at our website, nafimentor.org.